Alright, everyone, thank you for coming out for tonight's Healthy and Disordered Eating series. We have Dr. Cristen Haltom, who is a clinical psychologist from the Tompkins County area, and she actually got her PhD from Cornell, I believe. And she'll be presenting on media's influence on body image and eating habits and how to combat that with becoming body mindful.
Thanks. So just to say a little bit more, I teach a course in psychology at a different college part-time, and I have a very full-time private practice, which I've had for about 35 years. And people always ask me what percentage of your client population have eating disorders, and it's roughly 60%. So I work, pretty much full-time, Monday through Friday. I always work on a team when I work with eating disorders. Tonight, though, what we're going to talk about is a little bit different than the recovery work, the treatment work. We're going to talk about body image, and really a lot of this talk is relevant to very early stage development of an eating disorder as opposed to what's going on in the middle of an eating disorder. Or, because research has shown this more recently, people who are coming out of an eating disorder. So the recent research has shown as people kind of head into full-blown anorexia and bulimia, they go through a period of kind of mild eating disorder symptoms, kind of revving up, eating disorder not otherwise specified, full-blown anorexia, bulimia, or binge eating disorder. And then on the way out of those eating disorders, they pass through another stage of partial syndrome, and then often in recovery have given up most of the behaviors. So this talk is particularly relevant for people who are heading into an eating disorder or in recovery and heading out of an eating disorder. And I'll say a little bit more about that as we go on. So I wanted to pick kind of a new topic. You've had some great topics here. I saw Haltom speak last year, and it was just so fascinating because she had neurological damage as a result of anorexia. And to hear her talk about that first person was just really, really helpful to me as a clinician. Body image. So we all have body image. And the question is, how do we assess our body image? And usually that involves a normal developmental process called self-objectification, which I'm going to focus on a fair amount tonight. So in order to assess body image, people in their mind's eye, starting from the time that you're a child, will see themselves as they think other people are seeing them. So it's seeing you, seeing me, is the process. And this isn't normal. Kids, 3, 4 years old, begin to realize what their parents are saying to them. Well, it's not okay, I'm going to give the example in a minute again, of wearing your tutu to school. So if you're 6 years old, you're 5 years old, and you come out for the school in the morning with your tutu on, your mom is going to say, not appropriate. Can't wear your tutu to school. But at 8 years old, your mom doesn't have to tell you that. Because you in your mind can say, how are people out there going to see me, reflect on my image, if I wear my tutu to school? They can immediately imagine an audience out there that's viewing them, and they can say, oh, that audience would think I'm very uncool if I go to school in my tutu. So from the time you're 5 or 6 to the time you're 8 or 9 years old, you begin to objectify yourself more and more. That's normal self-objectification. Self-objectification involves surveying yourself. And it's a process that people, especially with eating disorders, are doing on a very frequent basis. Surveying how they think that they look to other people. Women do this a lot. Men do it too. All people do it. We're going to veer off to where there's too much self-objectification. So here's another little sidelight to self-objectification, which I'd like to talk about. I guess I'm going to stand up if it's okay. Just for a minute. A lot of us are spending hours in front of the media and we watch 3,000 advertisements a day if you've got a lot of time in front of a media screen. And we learn to live life in the third person as a result of that. The best example is a 12-year-old who brought in to me her anime, her favorite anime, that she gets into up to 6 hours a day, straight A student, had some issues with body image and anxiety disorders. And in this anime, she goes, I'm going to show you my favorite one. She said, don't worry, there's no violence. So I said, okay. There were a few swords that came out at the beginning. But in any case, we go into her anime, and I'm fascinated by what I'm seeing because all the teenagers in this anime event go into login land. So they're going over to their avatar self, okay? And then they can't get back to their houses. So they are living their lives in the third person. And so she's identifying with particular characters who are in login land and can't get back to themselves. But this is an example of the kind of third person living that I think we're all doing as a result of being steeped in media. Even watching television, we're taking a third person perspective and it encourages third person living. When we start thinking about how we look to other people, we also start judging and evaluating ourselves. And unfortunately, for people who are headed into negative body images, body image dissatisfaction, they judge harshly. They think that other people think that they don't look good, something about the shape, something about their size. And as they think about being evaluated by others, being observed by others, it isn't necessarily a happy event. It isn't just a normal self-objectification to gauge how I should act in a situation. And I gave the example of a little girl with a tutu. Two people, Fredrickson and Roberts, in 1997, feminists, came up with this idea of the self-objectification of women. I talk about it as a more general topic of people, self-objectification of people. Began to realize that because of our exposure to the media, we're all over self-objectifying or being encouraged to do so. I left you with a questionnaire as a handout, so if you look at the SOQ, and I was going to maybe have you do this while we're sitting here, but I realized that this is getting taped. So, yes?
They're up on
Oh, they're right over here by the door. So I'm going to have you do this on your own rather than waiting. And I'm going to tell you how to score it. And also you might be a little more honest with yourself if you do this on your own. So when you answer this self-objectification questionnaire, you will understand a little more what self-objectification is about. And you can kind of see where you are on the scale. So there are 10 aspects of your physical concept that are listed on this questionnaire in front of you. And the directions are to rank how important each aspect of your physical concept is to you. But you can only use one number once. So the part of your physical concept that is the most important to you gets a 9. The second most gets an 8, down to a 0. So it's 0 to 9, ranking the most important part of your physical concept as a 9, and so forth. And here's the part you'll need a pencil to write down the scoring key, because it's not on your, I don't think it's on your handout. So you add up the following numbers. If you want to do this, optional. Numbers 1, 2, 4, 7, and 9. And after you do the rankings, you just add up your rankings for numbers 1, 2, 4, 7, and 9. You give yourself a score on those 5 items, 1, 2, 4, 7, and 9. And then add up your rankings for numbers 3, 5, 6, 9, and 10, are the ones that are left. So you're going to have 2 numbers in the end. you subtract the first number from the second number. So you first add up 1, 2, 4, 7, and 9. And you're going to subtract that number from the addition of 3, 5, 6, 8, and 10. So it's possible to get a score from minus 25 to a plus 25. And I tried to look the norms up, and I found one study, college students, and you're going to probably end up somewhere around 0 plus or minus a few points. The higher your score, the more you are self-objectifying. So it's a way to sort of check out where you are in the continuum of self-objectification. And what you're going to notice about these items is that half of them are about appearance aspects of your physical self. The other half are about competence aspects of your physical self. So, examples. Number 10. What rank do you assign to your measurements, your chest, waist, and hips? And that would be an example of appearance or competence? Appearance. Another one is, what rank do you assign to physical coordination? Appearance or competence? Competence. Okay. So you're subtracting the competence numbers from the appearance numbers. And the higher your score, the more you're self-objectifying. And by looking at these items, you can kind of see the different aspects that go into our body image related to our physical selves. Now I'm going to trace the process, body image and self-objectification, to eating disorders. So here goes. There's normal self-objectification. You temporarily take the third-person view of your body in order to gauge how you're going to fit into a social situation, how you're going to act, to briefly assess how you look to other people for social reasons, self-evaluation reasons. What do we compare our body image to once we are thinking about how other people are seeing us? We use an internalized standard. You're going to start recognizing eating disorder talk here. Where do we get our internalized standard of what looks right about our body? From the media, largely from the media. We get it from many sources, school, culture, family, etc. But a lot from the media. We get this internalized standard. So when we begin to imagine an audience out there watching us, that audience is bearing that internal standard. That audience in your imagination is saying, you should be thin. You should have small hips, etc., etc. You should be the smallest person in the room. Those would be examples of internalized ideal media body image standards. Then, after we compare ourselves to that standard, we look for discrepancies. And if there is a discrepancy there, and there usually is when you have a negative body image, you're unhappy with your comparison to your internalized standard, you want to close the gap. But instead of bringing the internalized standard to where you are, you want to bring yourself, heading toward an eating disorder, to where the standard is. So you begin to experience the dissatisfaction, the discrepancy between yourself and your internalized standard, and you want to close that gap. To get motivated to close that gap, which could mean things like dieting, exercising, etc., you engage in self-shame. So we engage in self-shame when we don't meet that standard, right? And we use the shame to kind of whip ourselves into shape, to get ourselves moving toward that internalized standard. And we start to want to change our bodies to fit what we think that standard is. Now, unfortunately, when people are headed toward eating disorders, that self-surveillance process is habitual. It's going on way more than it is for most people. So there's a constant comparison, case in point. I was talking to a teenager, and she was telling me that it's hard for her to walk down the hallway in her high school without body comparing. So she's got in her head an idea of a standard, that is the standard she wants her body to be. She's constantly self-surveying, am I good enough, am I meeting that standard? She's looking at people going down the hallway, and what she's seeing is body parts. So because you're going to hear in a minute, we tend to break women's bodies down into body parts instead of seeing them as a whole. There's comparison of sections of body, I'll say. So what are you looking at when you walk down the hallway? Well, I'm looking at people's butts. And then I'm comparing their butt to my butt, back and forth, back and forth. Not even seeing necessarily who the butt belongs to, but just focusing on this butt is not good enough, or the thighs. These thighs are not good enough. And then going to class, now having done all this self-surveying and body comparing, and now trying to pay attention in class. Because now the body shame is not better, it's worse. So the person's trying to pay attention in class, their head is still with body comparisons that have happened, or walking down the hallway, and the thinking starts, how can I get rid of this body shame? How can I make my body better? I think I'll skip my lunch. Something along those lines that will close that gap. Unfortunately, our media encourages women to shape themselves in negative ways, and it objectifies their body. Our media encourages us to see ourselves as objects for the gaze, objects for the view. For women, it's often the view of men or males, heterosexual women. So the imagined audience is the males that we want to see us as sexually attractive, as you're going to see in the pictures. Sex sells. Sexual objects sell. If we start to internalize that, we start to see ourselves as sexual objects. So because of my 12-year-old, ode to her, she doesn't watch manga. I mean, you guys know anime better than I do. But here we have one of the main characters in anime who is, this is for like younger kids, who is laid out with a really sexy, vulnerable pose, finger in her mouth, sort of waving. Pretty good example of objectification of female characters. Starts really young. This one, how many people have seen this image? It's a really common one to use when we talk about media, no? Okay, so what do you see here?
A woman getting stepped on.
Pardon me?
A woman getting stepped on.
Woman getting stepped on, right. It's interesting you said that because I hadn't even seen that part, but look, here's a couple of shoes. She's some kind of coat rack, some kind of shoe rack, maybe getting stepped on. She's a useful tool. And presumably, because she doesn't have any clothes on, this is for the male view. And we begin to, again, internalize the standard. Is this what we're supposed to look like in order to be attractive? And is this what we're supposed to act like in order to be attractive, to be stepped on, to be used, to be available, to be vulnerable? Now this is portraying women as objects. These are beer commercials. You can't read it. It came out a little bit fuzzy, but this is Budweiser and this is Michelob. And this is conflating these women with the drink. So they are the beer. Sex sells. They look like a beer bottle. The beer bottle is now sexy because we conflated the beer and the woman. And this is a great marketing tool. But what does it say to women? I mean, I'd be interested in what you guys see when you look at that. About the message to women.
It's almost as if female bodies are being commodified themselves.
This encourages women to modify themselves so that they too can be sexy and looked at in this way. And one of the things that many people have noticed, if you get a critical media eye is that the women's bodies that are attractive, they all look the same. It's like Barbie doll all over again. So there's a particular body that we see over and over and over again, and that is the media ideal. Here's another common issue that's coming up in the media. So, she has no head. Your stomach shouldn't be a wastebasket. So the message there, obviously, is, you should not put junk in your wastebasket. It's a message about good food, bad food. It's a message about unnecessary eating. It's a message about controlling your eating. And she doesn't have a head. So she has no eyes, she has no mouth, no personality. She's just a body part. So again, take yourself back to the 16-year-old walking down the hallway in a high school. And she's feeling badly about her thighs and her butt. And so she is breaking the other girls down in the hallway into exactly this kind of body part and using that as some kind of gauge to see how she's doing in her pursuit of looking more like this. Here's another one. Women for sale. Truly objectifying women. That you just put the money in the machine over here and you get the woman of your choice. She is nothing about relationship, interpersonal relationship, the depth of relationship, nothing about their personalities. They're just bodies. And they're dressed, their bodies look basically the same again. And they're dressed provocatively or gesturing provocatively. And of course, here's that nail shoe again. I like what you said about getting stepped on. This is an album cover. Women for consumption. Again, here's a body part. Somewhere there's a woman that's attached to this, but that doesn't matter, right? He's putting salt on her leg. One of the messages here is very degrading to women. Now we're going to get to guys in a guy here, so we're going to get to guys in a minute. There's some similar stuff going on in terms of men being objectified. So here's her leg. It's his prerogative to just grab her leg and eat it. Okay, here's a guy picture, and this is an ad for salad dressing. Men are to be eaten too, but tell me the difference between what you see between the women advertisements and this advertisement of a guy in terms of pose, posture, the general aura of the male in this picture. Notice any difference?
Yes, more of like a powerful pose variant, because he's making eye contact with the camera and you can see his face and everything.
He's totally in your face. Yep, a much more powerful pose. He is laying down for vulnerability, but he's kind of like, look at me, and a much more power stance. Okay, so now we've got this idea that women pick apart each other's bodies when they're doing body comparisons. Any contention with that as you think about it? That women break down other women's bodies, their own bodies, into body parts. Well, there's a whole line of research going on. There's a Dr. Gervais, I believe, at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and she is doing a line of research that looks at this cognitive bias to break the body down into body parts. She does very cool research. Many of women in research, college students, and they were shown images, a large number of images, 40, 50, 60 images of people. And then just a few minutes later, after they were finished showing the images, they brought back the same images plus images of those exact same people, but only part of their body. So the images are actually from the knee to the top of their head. Those are the whole body pictures. And the part body pictures are a section like from here to here. Then they asked both men and women subjects in the research to identify which pictures they had already seen, which people, sections of body or whole bodies they had already seen. When they found the results, it matches the hypothesis you might expect. The most accurate measuring of, I've already seen this, for women was the body part, not the whole body. Not with the face, not the eyes. The people remembered the section of their body better than they remembered the whole. And here's the kicker. It was the same for guys. Guys also remembered women more by a portion of their body than a whole body. But when you reverse this, reverse genders, and you look at people's, men and women's ability to remember men's bodies versus men's body parts, it was exactly the opposite. Both men and women remembered the whole body of the men rather than the part without a context. So we know that there's this bias in cognition here to look at parts of bodies. We can't blame it on gender socialization because men and women do. Women do it to each other and men do this as well. It looks like it's probably the fault of the media. This picture is a fairly famous picture. And here you have a woman as an object. She is a table. The interesting addition to this picture is she's got a mirror under her face, so you can see the self-objectification process. So here she's an object. She's bare-breasted. She's got this like corset on and the tight black boots, right? Sort of a sexual pose. She's vulnerable and she's got a glass table across her back, so she's a table. And then she's seeing herself as this object. So it's one of the best pictorial representations of self-objectification. I see myself as an object. Apparently this guy, Isaiah Mustafa, is kind of famous, 2010 advertisement. Once again, if you look at his pose, he's looking a little bit cocky here. His body is not broken up into parts, although he's advertising himself as the sexy male. So men get the same message. This is what I am supposed to look like. But the men aren't as vulnerable. I had to look really hard for a picture of a vulnerable, sexually objectified male. So here's what I found. This woman is using a product to make her look younger, make her skin look younger, and she's presented and talked about by the company as a cougar, okay? And this is her boy toy here. She's clearly in the dominant position, and he is clearly for her use and for her sexual use. So it's hard to find one of these. I found all kinds of pictures where women were being sexually objectified, vulnerable, not looking at the camera, broken up into parts, not so many for men. So one of the points here is that objectifying men alongside of women, so a lot of women felt a little bit vengeful, like, well, how come we don't do this to guys? It's good that they get to see what this is like. But it's no better. This is not progress. Moving to marketing